You've probably heard the name Rothschild, the legendary banking dynasty that built Europe's financial infrastructure and rewrote its politics. But few remember the family that did the exact same thing in the East, the Sassoons. Their story is an epic saga that starts with exile and ends with a financial empire. They created massive wealth from goods the world craved but governments banned. Long before the term global economy even existed, they were the ones writing the rulebook. Welcome to the world of pyramid economics, where money, power, and history collide in that murky gray zone. The Sassoon story doesn't begin in London, but in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, Baghdad, at the turn of the 19th century. David Sassoon, the family patriarch, was the son of the Ottoman governor's treasurer. They were successful merchants for generations, but in those days, wealth always invited suspicion. When the political winds shifted, the Sassoons fell from grace. In 1829, David fled Baghdad with nothing but his family, his faith, and his deep knowledge of trade. He sought refuge in Bombay. At the time, Bombay wasn't the capital of the British Empire, but it was its vital artery, the bridge between British factories and Asian markets. For David, this exile was actually the opportunity of a lifetime. David didn't have a degree or any property, but he had something priceless: experience. He understood supply chains before the phrase was ever coined. He decoded what the British wanted, what India could produce, and what China would buy: cotton, yarn, textiles. He traded anything that moved through the port. But he did something different. He built a cross-cultural trust bridge. He hired Jewish, Indian, and Arab merchants alike. Saying, relationships, not contracts, build empires, he created a massive network that transcended borders. And then, he focused on the product that would make him truly wealthy, and controversial opium. During that era, the East India Company held a tight monopoly on opium. Addiction in China was skyrocketing, and the Chinese government banned it, but the demand was insatiable. Sassoon didn't approach this with chaos, but with precision. He didn't run opium dens, he was the banker, the insurer, and the supplier. He was the mastermind behind the empire's curtain. By the 1840s, his ships were sailing under the British flag, and his warehouses were overflowing. To some, he was a man profiting from misery; to others, a genius creating liquid cash flow out of chaos. The result? David Sassoon became one of the richest men in Asia. He reinvested every penny into ports, factories, schools, and hospitals. He didn't just move goods, he built the very roads those goods traveled on. David's sons spread across the empire: Hong Kong, Shanghai, London. His eldest son, Elias David Sassoon, moved to Shanghai right after the Opium Wars. Shanghai at the time was a bizarre city built on opium silver and foreign debt. The Sassoons literally financed the city's growth. Today, their fingerprints are still all over the massive buildings on Shanghai's famous waterfront, the Bund. Meanwhile, the other branch of the family returned to London. They were knighted by Queen Victoria and moved into the heart of the British aristocracy. Those who once lived the life of exiles in Baghdad were now rubbing shoulders with the British elite. At the start of the 20th century, the world began to change. The opium trade ended, and empires weakened. The 1920s Great Depression and World War II tore the Sassoon world apart. Their assets were nationalized, the family scattered, and they eventually became a historical footnote. So why should we remember them? Because the Sassoons proved that money knows no borders and that a network can be more powerful than a nation. Today's giants, Amazon, Apple, or massive hedge funds, essentially follow the model the Sassoons perfected 200 years ago: capturing markets instead of conquering land, generating power through dependency, not armies, escaping accountability via transnational operations. The Sassoons rose by feeding on risk, but they fell because they mistook stability for security. Their story teaches us a harsh lesson: if money becomes your only passport and profit your only principle, history will remember your consequences, not your brilliance. Because every empire built on imbalance eventually has to settle the check with history.